Orcas are the apex predators of the ocean. They hunt great white sharks. They work in packs like wolves, among the most coordinated hunters in the ocean. No animal hunts them. Almost none confront them. But in 2015, a research team off Iceland was listening to a pod of orcas through an underwater microphone. The orcas were feeding on herring, clicking, calling to each other. Then a sharp, high-pitched sound cut through the recording. The orcas stopped feeding. They stopped calling. They went silent. As the sound grew louder, a group of pilot whales came into view. The orcas turned and left. In experiments, scientists have broadcast orca feeding calls underwater. Belugas changed course. Beaked whales fled. Bull sperm whales, the largest toothed predator on Earth, moved away. Pilot whales charged toward the sound. This is the pilot whale, an animal with more neurons in the thinking part of its brain than any mammal ever measured. One of the few species in the ocean that charges orcas and makes them flee. What follows is why. Pilot whale females stay with their birth pod for life. The bonds inside a pilot whale pod are among the strongest ever produced in any whale or dolphin. Pods of 10 to 30 sometimes gather into superpods of 200 or more. They are in the same family as bottlenose dolphins and orcas, the second largest in the family behind only the orca itself. And they are one of the few species documented confronting orcas across multiple oceans, spanning decades of observation. A pilot whale is half the size of a bull orca, lighter, slower in open water, and orcas do kill pilot whales. Kills have been documented in the Canary Islands, Peru, and the Caribbean. They can win this fight, but most of the time, they choose to avoid it. In one documented encounter off Western Australia, orcas harassing a young humpback whale were confronted by a large group of pilot whales. The attack stopped. The Icelandic Orca Project documented 13 years of interactions between the two species. In most encounters, orcas left the area when pilot whales approached. In some, they fled at high speed, both species leaping across the surface. Playback studies have confirmed that orcas flee from pilot whale calls alone. No visual contact needed. An orca pod is typically 5 to 15 animals. When multiple pilot whale pods converge, the group can be 100 or more. Pilot whales are built for sprinting. They chase squid through the deep at up to 20 miles per hour on a single lungful of air. A 5,000-pound animal crossing at that speed hits like a battering ram. For an orca, a broken jaw, torn fin, or deep muscle bruise can mean weeks without a successful hunt. An injured orca slows the pod, and a pod that slows down catches less. The risk is rarely worth the reward. So they leave. Numbers and speed are only part of it. Orcas depend on echolocation, hunting with sound, the way most predators rely on sight. Their sonar can pick out a single fish from hundreds of feet away. When 50 or more pilot whales close in, all calling at once, that sonar is overwhelmed. Coordination breaks down. Hunting becomes too difficult. When researchers analyzed pilot whale vocalizations, they found something that changed how the field thinks about these animals. Pilot whales were mimicking orca calls. In 2014, researchers counted the neurons in the neocortex, the part of the brain responsible for thinking. The result, roughly 37 billion. Humans have about 21 billion. The pilot whale holds the highest count of any mammal ever measured. The neuron density is lower than in humans. The brain is simply larger, so the cells are more spread out, more neurons, less tightly packed. In a 2020 study off southern Australia, scientists caught pilot whales mimicking the calls of the orcas they shared waters with. Orcas have pod-specific dialects. Each group sounds different. The pilot whales had learned to copy the local version. An animal that can disguise its own voice to sound like its biggest rival. Orca populations specialize. Some eat only fish. Others hunt marine mammals. The two types have different calls, different behavior, and they don't interbreed. A 2019 study found that pilot whales can tell them apart by sound alone. When scientists played the calls of local fish-eating orcas, the animals approached aggressively. When they played the calls of unfamiliar mammal-eating orcas, the type that kills pilot whales, they stopped feeding and became more cautious. They read the threat before they charge. The organ behind its outgoing calls is a bulge of fatty tissue at the front of its skull called the melon. It shapes and projects every sound the animal sends. The echoes that come back travel a different path, through a channel of fat in the lower jaw, directly to the inner ear. Two structures, one to send, one to receive. This is an animal that listens to its rivals, sorts them by threat, and mimics their local dialect. A snorkeler found out exactly how strong a pilot whale is, the hard way. In 1992, a snorkeler named Lisa Costello entered the water with a pod of short-finned pilot whales off the Kona coast of Hawaii. She pet one, a young male about 15 feet long, named Notch. He grabbed her by the leg and dragged her down roughly 40 feet, let go, then grabbed her again. No scuba gear. She held her breath until Notch brought her back to the surface. Notch was not fully grown. A full-grown pilot whale is a different animal. The US Navy was paying attention. In 1968, in a program called Project Deep Ops, they trained a pilot whale named Morgan to retrieve objects from the ocean floor. On one occasion, Morgan made an unprompted dive to 2,000 feet with no equipment attached. There are two species, the short-finned pilot whale in warmer waters and the long-finned pilot whale in colder oceans. Both are deep-water sprinters. Off the Canary Islands, a tagging study tracked short-finned pilot whales making 15-minute dives to about 3,000 feet. They cruised to around 1,600 feet, scanning with echolocation, the same acoustic system that reads orca calls and mimics their dialects, now used to hunt. Once they lock onto a target, usually a large squid, they sprint 20 miles per hour, where no light reaches, on one breath. A 2017 study found long-finned pilot whales are just as fast. Tagged animals traveled at nearly double the speed scientists predicted for an animal their size. Researchers called it a spend more, gain more strategy. Burn through oxygen faster, chase harder, catch bigger prey. Their mouths are built for the chase, wide jaws that create suction and pull squid in whole. In 2024, a GPS-fitted long-finned pilot whale recorded a dive past 3,600 feet. That is the animal that grabbed Lisa Costello by the leg and took her under. She said it was playing. An animal this fast, this intelligent, living in groups of 100 or more, bonds so close they can become a danger to the whale itself. But how can the strongest bonds in the ocean become the weakness? Pilot whales strand in larger numbers than almost any other species on Earth. When one gets trapped, the rest follow. The question is, how one animal gets trapped in the first place. Echolocation works well in open water. But in shallow bays with gently sloping sandy bottoms, the clicks bounce between the surface and the seafloor, losing energy with each reflection until the echo is too faint to detect. The whale sends out a signal and hears silence. In open water, silence means nothing ahead. In a shallow bay, it means the whale keeps swimming until there's nowhere left to go. Stranded pilot whales have been found with severe hearing damage, caused by cargo ships, military sonar, and underwater explosions used in oil exploration. Without hearing, echolocation fails. The animal becomes disoriented. It drifts toward shallow water, and the pod follows. One damaged animal can lead an entire pod into disaster. The reason the pod follows comes down to a social structure unlike almost anything else in the ocean. Pilot whale females stop reproducing by their mid-30s. They can live into their 60s. They are one of only 6 mammals known to go through menopause. Females that can no longer have calves still produce milk. They nurse calves that are not their own, sometimes for years. reproduction ends. They spend the rest of their lives keeping everyone else's young alive. And when a pod strands, the grandmothers strand with it. For an animal that can tell orca types apart by sound and mimic their calls, following a dying podmate into shallow water should be avoidable. Scientists still cannot fully explain why they do it. In September 2020, over 450 pilot whales stranded in Tasmania. The pattern repeats. One animal in distress. The pod follows. The beach holds them all. Rescue teams have dragged pilot whales back into the water only to watch them turn around and swim back to the stranded group. In July 2023, 55 long-finned pilot whales stranded on the Isle of Lewis, Scotland. All but one died. A March 2026 investigation found that the stranding may have started with a single female struggling to give birth. The pod followed her into shallow water. The gently sloping seabed and cloudy sediment created what the lead scientist called an acoustic trap, a bay where echolocation stopped working. The pod could not find its way out. Rescue teams eventually learned to use those same bonds against the stranding. They moved the youngest calves offshore, let their distress calls carry back toward the beach. The adults followed. The technique became standard practice in New Zealand. The same bonds that held the pod on the beach pulled the adults back out to sea. Mass strandings are accidental, but there is a place where people have been using those bonds on purpose, driving entire pods to shore and killing them by the hundreds. For at least 1,200 years, people in the Faroe Islands have used pilot whale bonds to kill them. The practice is called drop. When a pod is spotted near shore, a fleet of small boats forms a line behind the animals and drives them toward a designated killing beach. When the first animals reach shallow water, the rest follow. Hunters sever the spinal cord, with a lance inserted behind the blowhole. About 700 long-finned pilot whales are killed each year, but in 2017, that number surpassed 1,200. The meat is now known to contain elevated levels of mercury and industrial toxins. Faroese health authorities have warned against eating it regularly, particularly for children and pregnant women. The drop works because of the same trait that drives orcas away. In open water, the bond is a weapon. In a shallow bay surrounded by boats, it is a trap. The pilot whale has more neurons in the thinking part of its brain than any mammal ever measured. It sprints through the deep at speeds that would exhaust most marine mammals. It dives past 3,600 feet on a single breath. It charges the ocean's apex predator and makes it flee. Its grandmothers stop reproducing and spend decades nursing other mothers' young. And the bonds, the coordination, the need to stay together, that is the same thing that pulls entire pods onto beaches. There is a bigger, stronger whale that dives deeper, swims just as fast, and has bigger teeth. The sperm whale has been recorded at depths of over 10,000 feet, hunting giant squid in their territory. Find out why the ocean goes silent when the sperm whale hunts. That video is on screen now. Subscribe to Below the Blue and turn on notifications. We release new videos every week. See you in the deep.